welcome to Wildflower with Ashley Adair. I'm Ashley, and this week it's sprinkling on us a little bit. We hit 80 degrees Fahrenheit yesterday and had a storm system come through overnight. It's left us with some drizzly weather today, but also had some sun breaking through the clouds earlier. The tree canopy has really started to leaf out this week, which is going to make a big difference for the maturity and seed set of all of our spring ephemerals that we've been keeping an eye on. We have a few new things to show you this week, as well as a handful of surprises to show you as we get started with our walk. If you're ready, let's get started. Let's walk. Above the pitter-patter of intermittent drizzle, you can see how much more the young sugar maples in this woods have leafed out since last week. The woods is looking much more green than brown these days. For those of you joining us for the first time, this video series has mostly been discussing spring ephemeral wildflowers. A spring ephemeral is a woodland plant that completes its above-ground life cycle in a short period of time, usually between March and June in Indiana. These plants provide many benefits to woodland animals at this time of year, serving as food and nectar sources for insects and larger animals alike. As we get later into the season, we'll start seeing fewer spring ephemerals and more perennial summer wildflowers. Let's set the scene. I'm walking at McCormick Woods, a Purdue-managed property near Purdue's campus. I walked on Wednesday, April 29th this week. The weather was 57 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy, but the sun broke through a few times. This property is open to the public for hiking and mountain biking and is partially managed by a local mountain biking organization. On the left, you can see McCormick Woods seen from the south entrance adjacent to a golf cart path on the Ackerman-Allen Golf Course. It's been a real whirlwind of weather this week. Overnight lows dipped close to freezing after a storm system passed through on Tuesday evening. It passed through with quite a bit of wind at that. By Saturday this weekend, we'll be seeing the 80s again. As temperatures warm above 50 degrees, we accumulate what we call growing degree days, which is a way of saying days when most perennial plants can actively grow. So the warmer it gets above 50, the more growing degrees you end up accumulating. That's why trees seem to leaf out so much faster when temps are in the 70s for a couple of days. Just as a reminder, I'm hiking in northwest Tippecanoe County. If you're just as few as 15 miles north or south of me, you could be experiencing different conditions and different stages of plant growth and bloom at this time of year. It's also worth noting that not every spring ephemeral species is found in this woodland, let alone all of the different summer plants that we might be finding. Some species that are common or semi-common in other woods, like bishop's cap, Virginia bluebells, and hepatica, for example, are so far not found in McCormick Woods. But there are some species found in McCormick Woods that you might not find elsewhere. If you have a species that you're wondering about, please feel free to reach out to me for identification. Contact information can be found in the description of this video. So here's how it works. Each slide has information organized in a particular order. Here is the photo, here is the scientific name, and here is the common name. Below the common name, you'll find some interesting facts about the plant, how it's pollinated, its role in the ecosystem, and more. This week, we've added an update graphic in the bottom right of some of the slides to show you what's happening with a flower or plant we saw in weeks past. Northern red oak flowers were found scattered along the trail at the beginning of the hike this week, so we're featuring a tree as this week's first species. The northern red oak is a useful tree both for animals and for humans. Many species of insects and their larvae depend on this tree to survive. A number of mammals, including squirrels, mice, deer, raccoons, and others, feed on this tree. Some even nest here, such as bats and woodpeckers. Humans use red oak wood for furniture, paper, firewood, and more. As you might imagine, the northern red oak can be quite large if it plays such a big role in the lives of so many different animals. What we found this week were the flower clusters that form at the ends of branches that had fallen to the ground after the big storm that came through. Northern red oaks are monoecious, meaning that male flowers and female flowers are produced on the same plant. Do you remember how we discussed corn, another monoecious plant, in a previous episode? This is a very similar situation. The male flowers of the northern red oak are called catkins, and they're circled in purple to the left. The female flowers, which will eventually produce acorns, are circled in green to the right. They're those little red buds that have not quite opened just yet. This tree flowers at the end of its branches, so if we get big gusts of wind during stormy weather, those tips may break off like we're seeing here. Some of the tips broke off and landed straight up in the ground, as you can see on the left. The bloom time for northern red oak is a very short window from mid-spring to late spring, which may only last for a couple of weeks. Acorns, on the other hand, take almost 2 years to fully develop. Let's provide an update for the American ginger plant. This species spreads by rhizomes, forming large colonies. So if you see one set of leaves, you're bound to see many more sets in the same area. Ants will disperse the seeds via myrmecochory, which is very common among the spring ephemeral species we've been talking about, as you may remember from previous episodes. The seeds have nutritious elaiosomes attached, which provides food for ants and allows the seeds to develop in a fertile environment in the ant colony. American ginger began to flower this week, so let's take a look. The small inset shows how inconspicuous these flowers can look from above. They're usually obscured by the leaves above them, and they are usually pointed sideways, exposing their fuzzy exterior, which tends to blend in with the ground. This arrangement makes the flowers easily accessible to ants and other ground-dwelling insects. We have another fungus alert this week. Cereospora squamosus, otherwise known as dryad saddle, and occasionally also known as pheasant's back, due to the brown scales that can be found on the upper side of the fruiting body. This is a bracket fungus that's typically found on dead logs, but it's also occasionally found on living trees. Unlike other familiar mushrooms that we know as having gills, this mushroom is a polypore, so it has a network of pores underneath instead of gills. This is an important decomposer in the woods. It breaks down logs over time. Sometimes young specimens that are smaller than 8 inches are considered edible, but they are difficult to prepare. So I wouldn't recommend trying it out for yourself unless you're experienced at mushroom hunting. On the right, you can see the network of tubes on the underside of this polypore. We have a phlox update. Phlox is still blooming throughout McCormick Woods, and with so many flowers blooming, you can see quite a bit of variability across individuals. On the left, the flowers are nearly white. On the right, you can see them in a deeper bluish purple. There are still others that manifest as pink in this woods. Let's check out what's happening with Solomon seal. To review, this plant is closely related to smooth Solomon seal, and sometimes they are easily confused. So if you see this plant in your woods, it's possible that you have either hairy Solomon seal or smooth Solomon seal. This plant is attractive to bees and hummingbirds, and white-tailed deer often favor the foliage for a snack. The hairy Solomon seal in this woods began to bloom this week. The flowers are tube-like and have 6 small lobes at the end. These flowers are often visited by nectar-seeking animals, such as bees and the ruby-throated hummingbird. Remember that wild geranium from week 3? 3 weeks later, we're back with an update. It has finally started blooming. Let's review a bit. The wild geranium is one of our showier spring ephemerals, and it's attractive to a variety of insects, including bees, butterflies, skippers, and flies. Chipmunks are known to forage for the seeds, and the flower is a blush pinkish-purple color. This particular individual got chewed on a little bit right at bloom time. The flowers do bear some resemblance to cultivated geraniums. They have 5 overlapping petals and distinctive veins. However, our cultivated geraniums have many different colors and petal shapes and will bear multiple flowers at the end of one peduncle, or flower stalk. That's not to say that the wild geranium can't be used in the home landscape. It can do well in areas that have part shade. We have another sedge to observe this week. Carex albercina, or white bear sedge. This sedge is somewhat easier to identify than some of the others because it's one of the most common broad-leaved sedges that we have here in the Midwest. That's not to say that it's a broadleaf plant, but the leaves of this sedge are wider than some of the other sedges that you might more easily confuse with grass. The seeds are attractive to game birds such as wild turkeys and ruffed grouse. Always remember, when you're looking at sedges, remember that they have edges. So you're looking for that triangular shaped stem that indicates that it's not a grass. Take a look at the flowers seen here. The flowers are similar to those found in grass plants, but the structure is slightly different when viewed very up close. We have an update on the drooping trillium this week. This trillium, which we first spotted emerging in week 3, has finally started to bloom. The drooping trillium is not common in the northern half of the state, and it's rarely found in the southern half, so it's a real treat to get to see this one in McCormick Woods. It's a favorite food of white-tailed deer. However, insects don't seem to be too fond of the flowers. On the other hand, the seeds end up being distributed by ants. On the left, you can see the drooping flower in more detail. Characteristic of trilliums, it has 3 petals and 3 sepals, the green structures behind the white petals. On the right is evidence of a deer snacking on these plants. One of my favorite summer bloomers just started to pop up this week. This is the jewelweed plant. It's either Impatiens capensis or pallida. This annual plant starts out small, but it can reach 5 feet in height by midsummer. These flowers are very popular with bees and hummingbirds. The seeds, on the other hand, are popular with mammals and several species of game birds. The flowers will either be orange, which indicates that it's the capensis species, or yellow, which would indicate the pallida species. This plant is indeed a cousin of the impatiens that we commonly plant as ornamentals in our landscapes. The lime green leaves on this native plant are bright and easy to spot along the trail. I'm excited to see more of this coming up in McCormick Woods as we progress through spring and summer. Another new plant this week is Actea pachypoda, otherwise known as doll's eyes, and sometimes known as white baneberry, which is a little less spooky. The flowers of this plant only provide pollen, so it's visited by fewer pollinators than some of our other more popular woodland flowers. The flowers on this plant will bloom in a single cluster called a raceme. This plant gets spookier as it ages and as the berries mature. They somewhat resemble the eyes that you might find in an old-fashioned china doll. So when it gets closer to fall, we'll keep an eye out for those spooky-looking berries so I can show you what they look like. Another new plant this week is Persicaria virginiana, otherwise known as jumpseed. This is a cousin to the Pennsylvania smartweed and lady's thumb, which tend to thrive in sunnier environments. The plant is so named for the seed's ability to jump from the plant when a ripened seed pod is touched. Some improved varieties of this plant are used in home landscapes. Not all the individuals of this plant feature the dark reddish watermark seen in this image, but it can be a helpful distinguishing characteristic when comparing this plant to smartweed or lady's thumb, in addition to its fatter leaf shape than either of those two plants have. We'll wrap up with a curiosity found along the trail, a lumpy growth on the side of a tree. This lumpy thing is called a burl, which is basically a tree tumor. Plant stress, whether it be caused by disease or injury, is generally the cause. Many burls grow underground, but those that grow above ground, like this one, will form intricate patterns in the wood beneath the bark, which is prized by woodworkers. This tree must have experienced a lot of stress before it died. It's covered in burls from bottom to top. Now that we've wrapped up with new species and updates for the week, let's take a look at what's going on with the invasive species. This is the perfect time to pull garlic mustard. I happened to visit this woods right after a big rain, and it makes it so much easier to pull this plant up out of the ground. Not that it was too difficult to pull before, but it's always easier to have it easy to pull. If you see it, pull it up and pack it out. If you don't have a trash bag handy, you can hang these upside down from a tree branch, or in a pinch, you can leave them on top of a stump. Just try to leave them somewhere that they'll dry up and not reroot. I pulled up 4 large bundles about the size of the one in the image at the edge of the woods alongside the Ackerman Allen golf course. Sometimes when I'm walking along in the woods, I just can't help myself and I have to start pulling them up. Please use the resources shown here to learn more about invasive species featured this week and in past episodes. Stay safe, practice physical distancing, and make sure to get outside when you can. Please visit Purdue Extension Montgomery County on Facebook and give us a follow.